Okay, so this week, what we're going to continue doing is sort of applying what could be thought of as sort of real-world insights and other considerations into sort of our simple model of labor and employment. All right, and so if you recall over the last, already 11 weeks, which is shocking, right? If you recall that over these 11 weeks, we started somewhere very simple. There were employees and there were employers, and then once these two groups of people met, then they'd come to some sort of agreement about how much work they were going to do and how much they would be paid to do it, right? And that was, sort of where we started, right? And then we complicated this a little bit, saying, that there are other considerations that matter, such as where you live and your friends and your family and that kind of stuff. And we complicated it further, noting that households have a trade-off between household production, leisure, and work, right? And so there were various means by which we could accomplish, any given task. I could maybe instead of watching the kids myself, I could hire a nanny, right? And then that would allow me to go to work, right? And so that was another complication that we did. We added into the model, right? And then last week we noted that there's lots of different ways in which we can pay workers, other than just a simple wage. We can pay them in health insurance. We can pay them in childcare. We could pay them in cars or cell phones or anything else like that, right? And so this week we're going to continue this by noting that employees can and sometimes do shirk. Okay, and so we're basically pointing out that shirking exists. Okay, and the idea here with shirking is that sometimes workers will actually do less. They won't work as hard as they can, or as they can, or as hard as they agreed to. Okay, and so we see this all the time. There's nothing, egregious about this. It's not like shirking means, you put your feet up or you take a nap under your desk, although those would certainly be forms of shirking. But it could be as innocent as, checking Facebook while you're at work, right? That would be a form of shirking. Or updating a tweet, right? Or ordering something off of Amazon, right, while you're supposed to be at work, right? These are all forms of shirking, okay? And these are things that if your boss saw you do, they might not be happy, right? They might not be thrilled that you are checking Facebook and such while you're supposed to be working, right? And we can also note that this might be difficult to observe. So if I'm fully honest, I, of course, have checked Facebook at some point today, and while I was at work even, right? That's how bad I was. I actually checked Facebook at work, right? And no one knows until they see this video. So maybe I should edit this part out, right? But anyway, but we see this all the time, right? It happens, no big deal, okay? Well, it can be a big deal, but it happens, okay? And the point is that your boss has hired you to do something and then is unable, for whatever reason, to perfectly monitor you, to perfectly watch you, right? It's not like your boss is hovering over your shoulder. So, right now I'm sitting in my office in business and the door is shut, right? So presumably no one could see whether or not I was actually working right now, okay? As it so happens, I am, okay? So, so much the better. Okay? And so the point here is that shirking exists because it's difficult to observe and prevent, right? We could also refer to it as sort of what's called a principal, I think it's AL, a principal agent problem, where we have a principal who has effectively hired the agent to do something, but is unable to observe them. Okay, so the principal agent problem is a famous or classic problem in economics. I'm sure at some point you guys have heard of it in a different class, so I won't belabor it here. But basically the principal agent problem is where the principal hires the agent to do something and then just sort of has to trust them to do it, right? And in situations like that, the agent might, cheat. So we can think of, let's think of shipping in medieval Europe, right? So frequently, what would happen with merchant ships is someone would fill the ship with goods, and then they would hire someone to sail it across the ocean. And so that person would go across the ocean, and sometimes, that person being the agent of the principal, right? And sometimes that person would just steal the cargo, right? They'd just steal it and say, well, this ship, the cargo and the ship, right? They'd say, well, this ship is now mine, right? And so that would be a principal agent problem because the principal, who the owner of the ship and the cargo, was still on land. The agent was out at sea, right? And the principal couldn't monitor the agent, and so the agent took advantage of it, okay? And so we can note, all kinds of things like this, okay? And we can also note the difficulties of figuring out, just how productive each individual worker actually is, right? So for example, suppose that we have two people in the notes, right? We have two people named Chip and Trey who are helping a friend move a couch up a flight of stairs into her new apartment, okay? And so owing to their backgrounds, Chip is much stronger than Trey. However, he's unable to carry the couch up the stairs on his own, right? So clearly the couch isn't going up the stairs without the work of both Chip and Trey, okay? But it's also true that Chip is going to be doing more of the lifting than Trey is, okay? But if we paid Chip and Trey the same amount, then it would be the case that Chip would be underpaid, right? As he would be doing more than half of the work, but only receiving half of the pay, while Trey would be overpaid, right? As he would be doing less than half of the work, but still receiving half the pay, right? And so as a result of this, Chip might not try as hard as he could, right? Which may prevent the couch from actually getting into the apartment in the first place. And so to solve this, we would need to pay Chip more as he would be contributing a greater share of the work than Trey, right? But how much more, and how would we determine this, right? And while this example is admittedly easy to resolve, especially among friends who know each other, right, the answer is not so clear within firms and businesses who oftentimes rely on the coordinated efforts of people in completely different locations who do not know one another and probably never will. Okay? And so we can think about this in the context of even like group projects that you guys have done in school, right? So if you've ever had a partner in a group project, right, how many of you ended up just doing all the work yourself? Right? So I know like I always did all the work myself because I could never trust my partners in high school to do work that was acceptable to me. And so I just did it all on my own, and yet they all got just as much credit as I did, right? So there are cases, even in your own lives, where shirking makes sense, right? And so my partners, anyone who got assigned me as a partner, knew that they could shirk because I would just do it all excuse me, all myself, right? I would just do it to get it done, and I'd do it well, right? And so to put this sort of problem briefly, employers often have to make managerial decisions that are rooted in practical realities, right? So and there's several reasons why this would be the case. So one, workers will differ from each other in work habits, which will greatly affect productivity, but are difficult and costly to observe before and after hiring. Okay, so we can have a lazy worker and a hard worker, and it might be difficult to tell which person's lazy and which person's hardworking just by looking at what they're doing, right? Especially in the case of people who don't produce a physical product, right? So writers perhaps are the most notorious ones here, because they might have to sit around all day and think about their stories, and there might be nothing to show for it, right? So another reason is that the productivity of a given worker with a given level of human capital will vary over time or in different environments depending on their level of motivation, right? So workers might be motivated. So let's write these things down real quick. So the first one, workers differ from each other in work habits. From each other in work habits, all right, that are difficult to observe. All right, second one, productivity. I'm going to use mathematical shorthand here. Is a function of, let's see, human capital the environment and motivation. All right, so obviously people who have more human capital will be more productive. People in a better environment, maybe they'll be more productive, maybe not, right? People who are motivated better might be more productive, okay? And so all these sort of things, we can think of this as a sort of employer recipe for productivity. If they improve the working environment, right, maybe that'll make things better. So one example of this, I am currently slated to get a new computer at work, right? And I'm really excited about this because the current computer that I'm using, frankly, isn't very good. In fact, it's so bad that I oftentimes just unplug it, put it over in the corner, and use my laptop because that's way better. But the new computer is going to be great, and so I would have a better working environment, right? It'll also take up less space on my desk, and so I could actually have my keyboard up here while I'm recording instead of over here, right? So that would make things a lot easier, right? So hopefully that thing comes soon, right? So the third practical reality, right, would be worker productivity over a given period is also a function, so I'll call it G, of their innate ability, which is just sort of their natural talent, the level of effort, and the environment, and the outdoor environment, to distinguish it from this. Okay. And so, there could be your innate ability. That's something that businesses or corporations or anything, they can't change, right? You either have the innate ability or you don't, right? You're either born with it or you don't have it, right? You can learn it, but you're never quite born with it, right? But we can sort of influence your level of effort, and we'll talk about ways that businesses do that. And they sort of can influence outdoor environments, such as the weather, which is why this is in scare quotes. So it's not just the weather, but it's also various business conditions and perhaps even the actions of other employees, right? So we can do things like that. And then finally, the real key to being productive is to take initiative. Right? Employers don't want to hire someone who isn't going to be motivated to do the things on their own. They don't want to sit there and sort of tell you, well, do this, now do that, now do that, right? Ideally, an employer finds someone that just does the work that needs to be done, right? They don't want to spend all day looking over you, making sure that you're doing everything, and giving you set step-by-step instructions, right? They want to hire you to basically do the job and let you figure out how to do it, but make sure that, and then have you make sure that you yourself do it well and do it correctly and do it right the first time, right? And so employers are going to have to carefully choose their management strategies and how they pay people in order to not only attract the right kind of employee, but also offer their employees the right kind of incentives to sort of maximize productivity, right? And in doing this, the firm has to weigh the various costs of each incentive structure against its benefits, right? And so this week, what we're going to focus on is the role of the firm's compensation packages in sort of optimizing worker productivity. So we'll look at various ways that businesses pay each other, pay their employees, right? We'll look at how that various means by which firms can pay their employees, and we'll sort of build an understanding of what the benefits of those forms of payment are and what the costs of those things are. Okay, so we'll pick it up in the next video.